Hello everybody and welcome to I Dream of Indie. My name's OldGamer Joe. I'm back at you with another review today. We're looking at Malek Dark Demon on the Nintendo Switch. Here's an action platformer that was released all the way back in 2016 on the Steam PC platform. So it's a game that is a long time coming to Nintendo Switch. And normally this is the part where I would talk about the game's storyline, but the intro to this game was just such gold, I simply couldn't do it justice. So I'm going to roll the clip real quick.
A dark civilization that lived long before mankind, and a king powerful enough to rule the devil, Kindar. He ruled his world with cruelty for 3,000 years.
So then, that was quite the movie announcer voice. I just couldn't let you miss out on that. But at any rate, if you've played any action platformer in the last 10, 20 years or so, or however long, you'll feel pretty comfortable with this one. This game has a little bit of attacking, a little bit of jumping, and a little bit of magic using. Actually, more like a lot of bit of all of that. The game features 16 levels in total, so this isn't a very long experience, and you do collect gold as you platform your way through these fairly linear levels, though there are a couple of branching paths here or there that have some hidden treasures for you to collect. These treasures are then spent in the shop if you so wish, but there's kind of a built-in difficulty really here, because if you don't use the shop, I didn't until really close to the end of this game, you'll basically be playing the game on somewhat of a normal-ish hard mode. There isn't really a whole lot to purchase in this shop anyways, outside of a few weapons that are a bit stronger and some more health, so yeah, basically makes the game a little bit easier, but this isn't the most difficult platformer I've played anyways. Malek Dark Demon feels pretty decent actually. Clearly the developer has a basic understanding of how a platformer should work. The jumping is responsive, you do have a double jump here, and you're going to need that quite a bit, as you'll be landing on a lot of platforms that will fall out right underneath you. Jumping is done with the B button, and attacking is done with the A button. I'm never really a big fan of attack being on A, I would always prefer Y, but I did eventually get used to it. You also have a button dedicated to casting spells. These spells include fire spells that can hit enemies from a distance, as well as ice, which again works from a distance, but will also freeze certain enemies. Much like the overall gameplay, the level design is just average. It's solid, it's not offensively bad. Most of the levels have a decent layout to them. I wasn't really frustrated with any of them, and some of the enemies are pretty interesting to deal with. You can either avoid them entirely by jumping over their heads, or you might choose to engage them in combat, whatever helps you to avoid the most damage. The patterns that they'll throw at you are pretty easy to understand, and I wouldn't qualify any of these enemies as cheap per se. The bosses are very much the same in this game. There's 3 in total, and they throw very basic patterns at you. They're easy to learn, and by the second or third round with one of these bosses, I was basically taking no damage whatsoever. All in all, you have 3 lives in order to try and complete these levels, or else it's back to the beginning. None of these levels are particularly long, and they do feature a checkpoint or two, so if you make it to a certain point in that level, you don't have to worry about backtracking. Outside of the main 16 levels, there is a 2-player mode of sorts here, where you can participate in a race against another player. I didn't have a player with me at the time of this review, but I did hop in there just to see what it's all about. Looks like a pretty standard race to the end, and there's also a battle mode where you can fight one another. I don't see either of these modes ultimately adding much replayability to this game, but at least they're there. By far my favorite aspect of Malek ended up being the art style. Everything is cast in shadow. It has sort of an underground vibe to it, like the underworld or something like that. All you see is the beady little red eyes of your main characters and some of the enemies. I think it looks pretty cool. The art direction is decent, though you will get a lot of repeat enemies and a lot of the levels start to look the same after a while. But yeah, some of the enemy design here is pretty solid. I enjoyed the aesthetic of this one overall. I also like the orchestrated soundtrack, which has a bit of a 90s PC vibe to it. It works pretty effectively for the most part. I will say the sound effects in this game are a bit lacking, unfortunately. There's really only a few grunts and moans here, not really the most inspired of sound effects. At the end of the day, however, Malek gets enough of the fundamentals right to be entertaining. This isn't a platformer action game that's going to blow your mind in any significant way. You're kind of going to go through these 16 levels and have a decent time doing so. You'll take a few deaths, you'll learn the patterns of enemies. You'll get through it though. It's not a super difficult game. It's not really a memorable game, though I did like the art style quite a bit. It's entertaining, and it's $9.99. You know, it's hard to complain about a game that's $10, but at the same time, there's not a lot of value here for that price. I would have pinned this one more around $4.99 or something like that. It is worth noting that I came across a couple of glitches during my time with the game. At one point I was trying to hit a switch and it simply wouldn't activate, and I also was able to walk through a wall, which was kind of weird. Overall, expect the bare basics of platforming mechanics here, and you might have a decent time. We'd now like to take a moment to thank our great indie warriors who support us through channel memberships: Mitchell Hall, Kevalo, Bunny, Bill T-Kaz, Christian Cruz, Wesley Williams Semple, Strict9, Rosie Syntax, Chris Jackson, Nathan Moore, Peach, and Adriana Amato. Thank you for all you do for independent content. Everybody else should head down to the description box below where there are a ton of ways to support I Dream of Indie. Help us bring a voice to the voiceless ones in gaming.